Welcome to Logistics Unplugged. My name is Brian Blaylock, and I'm your host, and I'm happy to jump in today to all things logistics. So let's pull back the curtain, take a look under the hood, and have a great discussion. Today, we're going to be talking about sustainability and logistics, and I am thrilled to have a special guest with me here today. I've got Will Augustine, our Senior Director of Engineering here at Blue Grace. Will, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Absolutely. So we know that that's a good buzzword, right? Sustainability. It's one of those $5 Scrabble words that I had to practice a couple times before we started talking. But it means a little bit more than the things that we do with it here in the logistics world. So talk to me in general, Will, a little bit about how sustainability has become such a key thing for business in general, and then we'll kind of tie it back to logistics a bit.
Sure, yeah. So supply chain sustainability, yeah, that's a tongue tire.
That is a tough one. Say it 3 times fast.
Yeah, exactly. There basically are 3 different scopes of emissions and sustainability measurements that happen in the supply chain. Companies will know, like they're basically looking at your direct consumption of raw materials, the things that are you're responsible for within your 4 walls of your facilities, whether they're offices. Some will even look at what their impact is to, say, commute times and how far your employees live from offices and what are those requirements of people commuting. How does that affect their footprint overall? What we get involved with quite a bit is on the transportation side of things, the delivery of the materials. About 80% of what affects the emissions is coming from the CO2 and on all the deliveries that we help with, and when we help people plan and manage, that's making a massive impact to their carbon footprint across the board in the supply chain. So when we talk with customers and we're trying to figure out, what are the things that are important to you, what are you looking for on the sustainability side, something that we see quite a bit is with customers shipping to, straight to consumers. That's one of the things that's kind of happened through and had like the kind of COVID effect. A lot of more materials are delivering directly to people's houses. The emissions that they're, how do I best say it? It's like the smaller the shipment and the faster the shipment, the greater the emissions factor.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
If you can ship something slow and on a large, think like tankers or trains, the emissions impact that each ton of freight or each package is much lower than when you get FedEx overnight or some kind of like extra fast delivery right to your doorstep. The convenience ends up kind of driving up emissions, and so you see that happening in this kind of world we live in now post COVID, and now everybody has gotten very comfortable with the at-home delivery type things. We've seen customers and companies are trying to see if they can offset that by, and you'll see it in a day-to-day and not even think twice about it, where a company that you're making a purchase from online will say, are you willing to wait an extra day and have these 3 items all deliver in one package? That will slow down your experience in the delivery end, but that will decrease the emissions factor of that shipment. And some companies have tried to make that visible to people and say, well, here, you will help the environment by doing that. And that they've shown that does influence that decision making. Sometimes they say, well, do you want to make it more convenient for you and just have it show up in 1 package versus 3? That's less likely to have an impact versus they say, if you do it this, you'll make X% change to your emissions on this shipment, which is kind of cool because a lot of the companies that are getting more and more involved in this, there are a few different areas that are influencing them and driving their changes. One is from the consumer side. So is your customer base driving your decision making? Is that impacting how you appear to the public, to the people that are into your product? So that's one of the areas where companies are realizing they need to take these changes and make initiatives to become more sustainable, is from the consumer side. Another big area is in terms of like government, right? And regulations. Right. You see that a bit more internationally. Companies that want to do business internationally, Europe, they're heavily focusing on these things and requiring it of companies. Some of our customers that we work with, they'll say, well, it's not something that is being regulated currently in the U.S. to a point where they having trouble or anything, but if they want to start to work across the seas or expand their footprint, then they're realizing, okay, now I've got to get my ducks in a row and come up with the measurements and be in compliance with their regulations overseas. So, and that's something that we've been able to help with. We find that a lot of customers are doing this already. They're trying to, ham and egg this, get it through with the spreadsheets on their own. We've got some tools we worked with them on. We've got some standardized reports, but the beauty of it is depending on which regulations they need to accommodate, we can tweak what those standards are and then make sure that it fits their needs and then build the reports around what they're trying to, be in compliance with.
Absolutely. And Will, it's interesting. You're talking about that whole large global impact, and it's really easy to sit in a vacuum and think, well, there's a lessening of some of those requirements here in domestic, and there's maybe a reduction of some of that influence. But you're exactly right. It's an economic decision too, because some of the same things that enable you to be able to reduce that carbon footprint reduce the cost of transportation. Yeah. And we know how important that is, and we know that to your point, if someone wants to be able to work with companies who do have initiatives around emission reductions or any other sustainability issues, that when you can quantify that for them and when you can share with them how some of these projects, like honestly, I just got off a call 10 minutes before I walked in here, and apologies for being late, where I was using something that your engineering team put together for one of our partners, where we could share with exactly very specific levels what a consolidation program that's already reducing the cost, that's better placing the product in the right locations throughout the country, and is also assisting in the product being closer for final distribution, how much emission savings there were, and it could be quantified and it could be shared with their customer. So not only did it help them reduce their freight as a percentage of goods and reduce those emissions, it made them sell more product because the customer was more willing to do business with them. So you have to look at that from all the angles, regardless of what you may think about it, because there's advantages, whether you're conscious or aware of certain advantages or more focused on just the bottom line. The bottom line is going to improve when you're doing the right thing with your products. So I love what you're doing with that, and I just mentioned it. So let's talk about your team that you run and how they're able to impact some of the sustainability issues for our partners. What can we do that help create some of those programs?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's some of the key drivers, right, are the size of the shipment, the length of the haul of the shipment, and then, get into different modes of the shipments as well. So what my team will do is we'll look at some historical shipments on a customer's account and say, all right, well, why are, of the facilities that you're operating within, have you thought of which ones you're servicing to the customers, which of the facilities house certain items, and we look to run an analysis. And some of the customers will do this for regularly to show them an improvement over time, because they'll never be able to get perfect. You won't be able to have every item in every facility on time, but ideally that's the goal, right? To be able to service your customers from the nearest facility in your network. So that's one of the easiest ones to work on is, well, let's just check to see how is your inventory placement program and where are you keeping product in relation to the demand that you have for it. Other things that we would try to work on with them is running our consolidation programs, using our EVO Smart Tools, the Plan Tools programs, where we can really take order information before the shipments are ever created. And the beauty of that product is the customers within the inputs that we receive, it's telling us the earliest date that the product is available and when does it have to be delivered by. and then my team will run a proof of concept for the customer and show them, well, if we know that these orders are already on these dates and they have to be delivered on these dates over here, well, let's look for some overlap. And what happens if we run them all together? What kind of loads does that create? Which of these will go small parcel, LTL, or truckload? Mm-hmm. And are we open-minded to try to put maybe a couple customers on the same truck? And we do multiple stops on this one and try to push the bounds on those. They'll find that there's savings as well as emissions reductions on that. You're putting less trucks on the road and you're spending less at the same time. And we're not having to make anybody wait any longer, because part of the inputs is, well, when does this have to deliver by? And then on the flip side of that coin is, well, when can it be ready? And so as long as we have those two dates in mind, we're not trying to force anybody to wait longer. We're just trying to see, is there any kind of redundancy in this data where we can kind of put these shipments together and help you and your customer out. So that's probably one of the most popular programs that we run for the customers, to try to help not only drive down their freight costs, but also find some emissions reductions. Another part of it that isn't always going to be a freight cost reduction, but if we really want to take the initiative seriously and help them with that sustainability effort, is the SmartWay carriers. So my team manages reporting that will show our customers how their CO2 emissions are performing. We look at it. There's a couple ways that different customers want to see it. They may want to see, what is my overall CO2 emissions. Others want to look at it by per shipment basis. The one that I tend to lean more towards is CO2 emissions per ton of freight shipped. And the reason for that is because if I'm trying to help a customer who's got a combination of LTL, parcel, and truckload shipments, then CO2 emissions per shipment is going to be a bit misleading. And same with overall emissions. Well, if they're having a great year, they're going in their, maybe their cycle, they have some peaks and valleys, and they have more shipments in Q4 than they do in Q1. So it'll make it look like those emissions are higher in one quarter than the other. So we're trying to measure it based on per ton of freight shipped. How is that? How is your emissions factor? And those that seem to show the best improvement over time, I've seen that with customers that not only are on our optimization program, so they come to us and we have them live within our EVOS platforms. Those that are using that and are engaged with us on a regular basis, because we'll try to test the bounds and say, all right, well, let's see some rules here where maybe we can get more freight on some of these trucks. Maybe we can get these orders closer to where the demand is. Those are the ones that we can see the most improvement over time on their emissions factors.
Yeah. And Will, it's such a good point too, that it's not always showing a reduction in emissions. It's not always even showing a reduction in spend. It's always a funny comment to me when one of my customers that we've helped grow like crazy, why are we spending more on freight? Because you're making an awful lot more money and getting a lot more product. So if you look at penetration to a particular market, I don't care if it's how many people are out there buying protein bars or how many people are out there buying popcorn or insert name of product here. You're still reducing the emissions in a segment or an industry if you're being responsible about the way you're delivering those goods. It just so happens that you're taking on more of that. And maybe a responsible shipper should be the one that's shipping more protein bars, popcorn, and various other accessories. So I love that. Now I'm gonna knock you off the tracks a little bit here, since had you on intermodal earlier. And knock you off the tracks a little bit here, Will. You and I both were chatting before we got started here, and I've known you for a while, and we've worked together for a while. But for me, more than a little while ago, I can't imagine that I was sitting thinking, I can't wait till I grow up and I get to go into logistics. And I'm guessing that probably didn't exactly happen with you either. And so I want to kind of draw the map that got Will from playing as a kid in the backyard to getting into school and figuring out the different things that you wanted to kind of grow into. Tell me what that path is that you think got from there to here, and what was there up front. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh yeah. It's pretty crazy to interview people these days because they're coming out of school with supply chain degrees in what we work in day to day and have been in for about 20 years now. I don't think any of us even knew that those were jobs or knew what the heck that was. So yeah, way back in the day as a kid, you're growing up thinking, well, you see the things on TV and you're like, well, those are the things I'm going to be. So naturally, you're like, well, I play football as a kid, so I'll probably grow up to be a football player. Being 5'10" and having a 5'0" 40, I think that's ideal, right?
So you didn't go in the first round of the draft.
Yeah. No, definitely not. But yeah, so as you learn things about yourself and the realities of the world, then kind of get older and say, all right, well, that's not for me. But numbers was always my thing, and it's like, all right, mathematics. That's gonna be my major in college. And then people were asking me though, what are you gonna do with math? What are you gonna do with those numbers?
Yeah.
And honestly, it's like, well, as long as it's with numbers, I don't care. I just want to do math all day. And there was one thing though that while out there, I nearly strayed course and went into anthropology. That was the one that I thought, as a kid, we were playing. You see dinosaur stuff. There's dinosaurs when you're a kid, or at least around for us. And so we thought that was super cool. And things like Jurassic Park, and you're like, oh, those guys look cool. Dr. Grant, I want to be like him, And
I like it. I can see you in Jurassic Park or maybe a little Indiana Jones.
Yeah, totally.
I like it. Well, I think I had the same path you did. At some point, I woke up and I was still 5'10", and I'm like, I told this bad joke on one of these before. Is Doctor, why am I not growing? Because you're 35 years old, son. It's not going to. So we are where we are, Will, and it's interesting. I stumbled in here by accident. At least you sort of got in here on purpose, and I'm glad you did, because every day I get to learn a little bit from your great team. So shout out to the engineering team because they help so much. But I'm going to jump back into to the topic a bit, and I want to talk about where you place freight and how you begin to create a better program and how we can make decisions from the order out. You talked about EVOS a little bit. EVOS is a order optimization product that's used at Blue Grace. I'm fairly familiar with it. Will's team is wizards with it. And it lets people, instead of trying to determine whether you can make a better decision on freight you'd already made decisions on, it lets you look at orders that you haven't made decisions on and make the right decision up front, which is a fantastic thing. But I've also had you in the past do center of gravity studies and help me figure out where the freight should live in the first place. And it's amazing how orders change when freight is close enough to the end buyer so that they can actually get just-in-time deliveries on their freight without it costing a fortune. So it's amazing what your team has done with that, and that's got to bleed into that sustainability, making sure that you're taking a significant amount of product to the end location that it's going to belong in, so you kind of skip all that intermediate, like you mentioned, the lightest unit of freight traveling the longest distance. Talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about positioning that freight.
Oh, yeah, sure. It's amazing to think about the things we don't know, right?
Yeah.
When we're early on.
I have a long list of that.
Earlier in my career, you take for granted. So one of the companies I worked at before was a major food distributor, and we had warehouses. There were 12 warehouses around the country, and I think that was one of my biggest learning opportunities, right? That's kind of like my supply chain school, was learning how to do things best there. Then you move on, and I spent some time in e-commerce, and where the vendors we're like, well, let's put the distribution center by the vendors, right? That seems to make sense. That's where it's coming from.
Yeah.
That's such a poor decision. You don't want to do that. You want to go where that demand is.
Change my answer on that SAT question.
You want to be, because you want to be able to have the shortest length of haul being all those the smaller shipments to the consumers. You want to have those being your shortest length of haul as possible. So bring the truckloads in, the shipments from the vendors, bring those things to the DC and make those a bit longer, because not only is that going to make a bigger impact on your emissions, is our focus for today, but the freight costs as well, and
Absolutely.
and then customer experience is also going to be much greater at that point. And then now you start to get into retention of those customers, repeat buyers, and all those kinds of things. And so you're going to greatly improve your chances of having that second and third purchase of those customers if you're keeping that supply chain or getting that final mile delivery as short as possible to them. So
100%. Well, I'm going to ask you, if you can, I'm not going to ask you to violate any kind of privacy or anything with a specific customer, but I'd love to hear a story. If you can talk about a specific, and you don't have to give me the company name unless you can, talk about a specific instance where saving emissions and working in a program like this has had a specific implication for a customer.
Well, I think one of my favorite examples of this, and it absolutely made an impact on their emissions, but it wasn't the driving force.
Sure.
And so I didn't get any customers' approval ahead of time or anything, but I think that these guys have been a customer of ours for ages. One of my first customers that I worked with at Blue Grace, I've been here for, I think it's 11 or maybe 12 years.
I know you're here when I showed up, so it's over 10.
Yeah. But so Lenny and Larry's was one that we started working on right out of the gates, or really early on. And it was entertaining because we ran our analysis and we said, this is how Lenny and Larry's looks. And then when they go live and somebody came to me and said, what's going on? This is all wrong. Why are they shipping so much? I said, what do you mean? And then I looked and said, oh my gosh, they're not this big. Sure enough, they were that big. They were growing. Their growth curve from the time that we analyzed them to the time that they went live shipping with us was just blowing up. And they were shipping the whole country from Southern California. And their growth, 70% of the customers they were shipping to were east of the Mississippi River. And we're just like, oh, they need a warehouse. This is not going to work. They can't keep shipping from Southern California. It's going to cost them too much. They won't be able to keep their product at the price point that they want it at this level. And they also were asking us for suggestions and said, okay, can you run some studies and show us where should we have that second warehouse pop in here? And sure enough, over time, then we ran the studies. It went to Allentown, PA, so it was over the eastern part of the country, and it kind of helped split the difference there. But absolutely lowered the freight cost, and as well, at the same time, we're lowering those emissions for them. So.
Well, and I'm glad you did, because probably about 30 minutes before we walked in here, I just had a delicious cookie that I don't have to feel guilty about. Thank you, Lenny and Larry's. Thank you, Will, for making sure it was available for me.
Yeah.
So most importantly, we had a little bit of fun today, and we got to talk a little bit about sustainability. But thank you for taking time out to actually listen to us today and to let us share with you a little bit of what we see. And I'll try not to use air quotes since this isn't on video, but sometimes green initiatives turn into green initiatives. So there's times that we're looking out for savings and driving down costs, which is extremely important, and it winds up doing the other green initiative as well. So thanks for looking out for all of us, Will. Thanks for coming up with different ways to create savings, and those savings meaning more than one thing. So thank you, everyone, for listening today. Will, thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to seeing you again next Tuesday. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks.